in moving on with some of the minor prophets, there's an interesting one, a guy named Habakkuk, and he is another interesting prophet because his prophecy is very unlike really the other prophets. Habakkuk's his prophecy is not addressed to either the Assyrians or the Babylonians or the Phoenicians or the Israelites. It's really addressed to God, and he's got a few issues with God, and a lot of them deal with the idea of God being a good God, but yet there being so much evil in the world, and it first kind of reveals itself in the evil that's going on around him in Israel, and so why. Obviously, this is a concern that is incredibly applicable to the modern world. So what is God's? What possible rationale can God have? What defense could He give for His lack of administering a just world?
Cool. I mean, we can talk about. That's one of the big slanders against God, right? Is if we have an all-loving, all-powerful God, then how in the world does this much evil exist? And at the same time, I look at it as being inherent with free will. You give free will, but if you only make creatures that use that free will to do good, is that really free will? And but love doesn't exist without it, and it's kind of been built into this fallen world that we have with free will, and it's interesting that even in spite of it, though, God makes it clear that He can redeem every last ounce of it.
Yeah, I think that we should understand that this is. I think that every young person that kind of hears one of their professors bring this up, they think, here's something that God couldn't possibly have an answer for, and they don't realize that it goes all the way back to Scripture itself, and that in Old Testament times people were asking these questions, and so there isn't anything new under the sun, and God's heard this objection raised before, and it's not anything that really bothers Him. And one of the things that's really fascinating about God's answer here is He says, well, there's really no problem here because the Israelites will get what's coming to them because I've got the Assyrians and the Babylonians to deal with them. And that is kind of an underwhelming answer for Habakkuk, and why might that be an underwhelming answer for him?
I guess not probably who he thought would be administering the justice that he might have been calling for or expecting. When the wicked seem to be the administration of justice, it doesn't seem to quite be the good versus evil or good triumphs over evil kind of picture maybe he was looking for.
Yeah, so why might God, it's interesting that God raises this as an answer, because obviously it's not something that's persuasive to the prophet, and so why might God, in God's realm of things, why might this be an appropriate answer?
I think, if you kind of take a look at Romans 8:28, and it says, and we know that God can work all things together for good to them that love Him and are called according to His purpose. And I think this is, in some ways, there's no better answer.
Right.
Even when there are those who are doing evil and perpetrating evil, I will bend that to my will, and I will accomplish my will with even that.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because to the prophet, this is not a great answer, but if you kind of look at it from God's perspective, it really is actually, I think, a great answer, as you pointed out, that what better thing to use to correct the injustice of somebody than injustice. You know what I'm saying? There's some great lessons that can be learned from this. You know what I'm saying? Like, because the thing is if you're being corrected of your injustice by somebody doing injustice to you, like, what are you going to cry about?
I seem to recall a story of you punishing Tyler. That's appropriate here, and where you were punishing him for lying, and then I think you said you were not going to put soap in his mouth or
Right.
something, and then put soap in his mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that what better thing to teach you about what injustice does than somebody perpetrating some kind of an injustice on you. And so there's a sense in which, God uses these injustices as a way of remedying injustice. And really kind of that's his answer here. And yet Habakkuk is not really enamored of this answer. And so God has another answer, which is kind of, well, the Assyrians are going to take care of the Israelites, and then the Babylonians are going to come and take care of the Assyrians. And yet Habakkuk is still not so keen on this answer. Now, what's his issue?
Well, I think one, it doesn't show in the end like, well, then what's to come of Israel? It's great that those who punish Israel are going to get punished, and and I guess we could say there's some infinite regress here that you could say, well, then who's going to punish the Babylonians and so on. But I think in the end, I think he also wants to see like, okay, so where's the redemption of Israel in all this?
If I push a kid down, right, when I'm on the playground and I'm a big bully and I push a kid down, I'm a fifth grader and I push a fourth grader down, then what is just? To have a sixth grader come push me down? Like there can't be, you know what I'm saying? Like there's no greater justice than that, in a sense. But then you run into the problem of infinite regress, and so are we just going to have a seventh grader come push down the sixth grader and an eighth grader push down the seventh grader? At some point, and so I don't know that Habakkuk's. I think he's got a point here about there being a problem. It might not be the problem that he's raising, but there is a problem from the sense of this can't go on forever. Like at some point, that doesn't really solve the problem.
It doesn't offer any sort of restitution for what they've suffered either.
Right. But at the same time, it kind of makes sense because who among us is really truly innocent, and so but there is a problem of well, if it's just if there's just an unending line of injustice, then how can we say that justice prevails? You know what I'm saying? And so really, what is the ultimate end of this? What's the ultimate answer to this?
Well, the ultimate answer is that at some point, one will die for all the sins,
Right.
for all the injustice, and suffer all the injustice in his own body.
Yeah, and when it's God taking that on himself, then it's hard to, like, what kind of opposition can you bring to that? And I think that's really the issue here with the questioning of Habakkuk, that God ultimately says, well, there is an ultimate answer, and ultimate justice is brought, and there isn't an infinite regress. There is a place where this stops, and it stops in the person of Christ, and so the Messiah is really something that's much more than what we could hope for. And one of the things that's interesting when you look at all the prophets is that I think that there's always the expectation in the prophets of the restoration of the kingdom of Israel, and that's just not going to happen in the way that they think it's going to. Now the kingdom will be restored, but it won't be restored to the great glory that they're expecting. And why is it that God ultimately would kind of be, his answer would be a disappointment to most people?
Well, I think it's one of those things that as long as we're pretty invested into this life on this earth, on the here and now and not the eternal, I think we would be disappointed.
Yeah.
And if the answer is, you're really going to like heaven, and all you want is a better earth, well, that's probably not going to be a very satisfying answer. But realizing that we're citizens of another realm that far exceeds this one.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, as long as you're not too invested in this earth, that is a great answer.
Yeah, I think that ultimately, if we were really to sit down and think about it and be honest with ourselves, we would know that there isn't really anything on this earth that satisfies us completely. And so to put our ultimate hope here in earthly things is foolishness. And really what these prophets are pointing at, even though I think a lot of them do it unwittingly, is that the answer is something much different than what we really expect.